In an industry currently trying to blend the story-focused gratification of the 2000s with the looter-shooter delights of the 2010s, it's super easy to miss the little things. Scour even the most popular video game franchises though, and from unanswered questions to just plain cool facts, so much essential information is detailed off the beaten path. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 6 video game reveals you totally missed. Number 6. Mary's actual location. Silent Hill 2. To this day, one of the most essential horror experiences in gaming history, what Konami achieved with Silent Hill 2 would go on to be referenced, aped, and constantly inspiring, but never bettered. The psychological tale of one James Sunderland traveling to Silent Hill, only for his past actions to slowly reveal the true horror of what had transpired, is one for the ages. But for this point, we need to delve into spoilers. Case in point, what really happened with Mary. We know by the end of the game that James actually killed her, triggering the likes of Pyramid Head as a manifestation of his guilt, dominance, and regret. However, the ambiguous nature of this twist calls into question where Mary's body actually is or was this whole time. Fans debate to this day the idea of her being in the trunk of the car or left somewhere else, but a chance tweet from original Silent Hill trilogy writer Masahiro Ito in 2012 spelt the whole thing out. Stating that Mary's body is on the back seat of James's car, not in the trunk, it adds an even more macabre twist to everything about this game's premise. Not only was James involved in Mary's murder, but the time frame of his arrival in Silent Hill means he essentially autopiloted himself to the titular town while avoiding the reality of his slain wife in the car next to him. Silent Hill 2, the horrifying gift that keeps on giving. Number 5. The real Zelda. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. The black sheep of the Legend of Zelda, and by far the biggest outlier in the entire canon thanks to being a side-scrolling action RPG with a brutal difficulty, Zelda 2 has cult status today but was a notably divisive release. Even Shigeru Miyamoto has stressed that he wished he did more with its overall design. Play now though, and providing you can overcome the difficulty, you'll find a title way ahead of its time, experimenting like Final Fantasy also did in the 1980s with an overworld, hit points popping off enemies, townships with moving NPCs you could interact with, and a surprisingly engaging narrative. Speaking of, there's a tiny point tucked away in the game's manual that actively changes what the Legend of Zelda even is. Though it's gone through a couple of translations over the years, millions of modern players who never had access to this text will miss the fact that only the Zelda in Zelda 2 is the real original Princess Zelda. Stemming from an evil magician cursing the princess to eternal sleep because she wouldn't tell him how to access the Triforce, Zelda 2's manual states that her brother, the Prince of Hyrule, ordered that every female child born into the royal household shall be given the name Zelda. It's long been a fan theory that each subsequent Zelda game is essentially an ancient tale told around a metaphysical campfire anyway, or we can go with the idea of various Zeldas popping up across a main timeline, finding their own links whenever Hyrule needs a hero. Number 4. The Doomslayer's new face. Doom Eternal. Late 2010s Doom has had one hell of a trajectory. 2016's edition lit the world on fire, became one of that year's best shooters alongside Titanfall 2, and set the stage for the ambitious juggernaut that is Doom Eternal to leave nothing on the cutting room floor. With the world of Doom now bigger than ever, rolling in multiple intergalactic warrior races, gods, and ancient weapons for the Slayer to interact with, DOOMguy himself was forever a masked silent avatar, a controllable walking shotgun who spoke with bullets and cocked his weapons at anyone wanting a response. Both main games make a point of barely touching on the idea that he could even be human, let alone have a face or a voice. The only thing he says in Eternal is variations on needing to rip and tear every last demon. Enter Doom Eternal's DLC, The Ancient Gods, and a bar of challenge and exhausting relentlessness in terms of how many enemies it throws your way that, looking at the trophy data, an average of 5% of players actually cut through. Get to the end though, and your reward is what the new Doomslayer actually looks and sounds like. Granted, the Dark Lord you're battling is a copy of the Slayer, so arguably that face reveal comes earlier, but seeing him in the armor feels like 5 years worth of payoff for the new games, let alone the Slayer responding with no to whether he has any last words before killing his ultimate nemesis. Number 3. SAREN, Anderson, and Why SAREN Hates Humans. Mass Effect. Thanks to the Legendary Edition sprucing up Mass Effect's combat model, we now have arguably the best sci-fi game of all time playing better than ever. It's caused many fans to go back and reapproach just how much BioWare got spot on in that first title. One of many aspects they knocked out the park being villain SAREN. While if you go down the Paragon path, you can eventually cause the real him to break free of Reaper Sovereign's indoctrination, killing himself and avoiding an entire boss fight, it helped establish SAREN as a memorable presence that, on reflection, only comes from a handful of scenes and and pieces of dialogue. After he kills fellow Turian Nihilus in the intro, we're told by Captain Anderson that SAREN is a living legend, but that he hates humans. Then we embark on the rest of the story. You always got the feeling that there was more to this, and though the why is given that he thinks we're growing too fast and taking over the galaxy, it's all a bit spurious given how much depth is given to every other aspect of the game. Well, check out novel Mass Effect Revelation and comic Mass Effect Evolution. Respectively, they detail how a young David Anderson attempted to work with SAREN Cloud and Sephiroth style, only for remnants of the First Contact War to lead him into claiming Reaper technology as revenge, only to result in his indoctrination in the first game. The Anderson/SAREN dynamic is a fascinating wrinkle to Mass Effect's entire lore foundation, and remains one of the coolest parts of the fiction barely touched upon in-game. Number 2, 343 Guilty Spark is a 100,000-year-old human. Halo. As much as Halo absolutely dominated the 2000s and is on track to return better than ever in Halo Infinite, the actual world of Halo has barely been covered in the games themselves. Yes, we see things like the Prophets, no bits and pieces about why they're trying to conquer the galaxy or their fascination with Forerunner relics, but so much wider lore and nomenclature was put into scores of incredibly complex novels instead. One thing to cherry pick for original trilogy fans though is the fact that everyone's favorite floating AI orb, who also killed Sergeant Johnson, 343 Guilty Spark, was actually once human. Not only that, but they existed around 100,000 years ago, last seen palling around with some actual Forerunners. Covered in the Forerunner saga of books, we find out 343 Guilty Spark was once called Chakers, a capable con man who enjoyed his work, but was forever gathering supplies and money to look after his family. After 3 novels worth of escapades involving various new characters and various ancient artifacts, a mortally wounded Chakers has his consciousness transferred into a monitor orb. Here, he slowly loses his memories and forges a new personality while being locked in isolation for the next few thousand years. No, I absolutely can't relate to that whatsoever. And number 1, you were never Big Boss. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. For this, something only the most eagle-eyed of players could have possibly spotted, because it is ludicrously well hidden. Spoilers for Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, but that game closes out with the reveal that the Venom Snake you've been playing as wasn't Big Boss in waiting, i.e. the background antagonist of the future portion of the title's timelines, as instead you were, well, you. Designing a custom face at the very beginning of the game out of nowhere, many, including myself, thought that this must have something to do with an online mode or other representation of a player in the game at some point in the future. Once you're 40 plus hours of game time later though, you've completely forgotten, leading to a cutscene where your custom face is now attached to a medic who went down in a helicopter crash with the real Big Boss. The pair of you would then choose to fool the world, as Naked Snake disappeared off to build his evil Outer Heaven base, and you did everything in Phantom Pain. It's a major shocking twist that's unique in making any one fan of the franchise play a key role in kickstarting the events of Metal Gear and Solid Snake proper. However, you can find a lot of this out many hours earlier. Just make a point of looking into any reflective surface and you won't see Big Boss's face staring back, but your custom characters. The helicopter you ride in for every mission has windows that show this, as do various portholes around Mother Base. The only piece of the puzzle missing is who exactly this custom-faced person is, but you can catch on to the whole switcheroo way before you're supposed to if you know where to look. And those were just 6 video game reveals that you totally missed. Let me know your favorites down in the comments below, and please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.